Millennia before there was a Book of Common Prayer, there was the Psalter, an Iron Age book of prayers for every occasion. These 150 ancient prayers and songs probably span 500 years of writing. As a collection, the wisdom of the Psalter is an enduring source of encouragement for those of us who turn to them. The Psalms are a large part of our Christian practice right here. We chant them every Sunday in our liturgy. We read them in our daily office of morning prayer. Our staff recites them antiphonally at the start of our Tuesday staff meetings. I love that the Psalter begins with happy at the first verse of the first psalm and ends at number 150 with praise. But in between, the writers plumb the entire range of human experience. No degree of suffering or ecstasy goes unexpressed before God. Happy are we all who will learn to pray so honestly. Our lives are an exercise in unpredictability. We can make wise decisions and take right actions all our days and still experience loss or abandonment, natural disaster or mortal illness. And none of these things are beyond the reach of God's love and mercy. So if you're ever in doubt as to whether we can take any and all of these experiences and lay them bare openly before God in prayer, check out the Psalms. You'll find the answer is a resounding yes. We can and we need to pray out of our anger, pain, our sadness, our grief, just as freely as we can and need to pray from joy, gratitude, praise, and contentment. That's life. From birth to death and beyond, we are completely dependent, whether we know it or not, upon forces greater than us. We think we are masters of our universe, but when we step back and gain a more realistic perspective, we are more like particles tossed around in life's soup of materials, to borrow from the writer Annie Dillard. In her incredible book, For the Time Being, she writes, "You can live as a particle crashing about and colliding in a welter of materials with God, or you can live as a particle crashing about and colliding in a welter of materials without God. But you cannot live outside the welter of colliding materials." The Psalms set us up from the very first word to learn how to manage life's collisions and blindsiding moments with God, and how to flourish and grow into our full humanity, even and especially when the inevitable changes and chances of life take place, whether they present us with joy or with pain. Happy are they, says the psalmist, whose delight is in the law of the Lord. They meditate on God's law day and night. They are like trees planted by streams of water, bearing fruit in due season, with leaves that do not wither. Everything they do shall prosper. A tree is the perfect antidote to that other image of particles tossing about in a welter. But in fact, trees are pretty much at the mercy of their environment, like we are, with nowhere and no way to run. It's no wonder a tree is the lasting image of resilience in the face of hardship and happenstance. And trees are a staple image of biblical literature. The prophet Jeremiah, like other prophets before him, uses the same metaphor. Happy are the ones who trust in the Lord. They shall be like trees planted by water. For all time, people have observed something about trees that embodies the wisdom of trusting God with our lives. When I moved to New Canaan last fall, a lot of people wondered if it was hard to leave the beauty of Colorado. And no. The mountains are pretty, but these Connecticut trees, there are so many. We arrived in August when the woods were thick and lush, and it felt like we moved to a forest. And I had to remind myself to watch the road, as my gaze was so easily drawn to the beauty and mystery of the thick woods along every winding road. And when winter came, as it always does, the trees shed their leaves, and suddenly from the car, Charlie and I can see entirely new features of New Canaan through the forest. A neighborhood back there, and a pond, and a stream in there. It's amazing what forestry has discovered about trees in recent decades. There's no such thing as a lone tree. Even across great distances, trees talk to one another. Their far-reaching root systems are the original information highway. They're sending warning signals not only to neighboring trees, but to whole forests, and even to other species. They look so silent and independent, but in fact, so much is happening beyond what we can observe. They help each other survive and thrive, and their own God-given systems of communication and flexibility give them incredible resilience against their everyday assaults from nature and humanity. Happy are they who trust in the Lord. They shall be like trees planted by water. No wonder the psalmist and so many biblical writers liken us at our best to trees. The Kentucky farmer and poet Wendell Berry makes this link even clearer when he describes a tree on his land this way. There's an old tree growing, a great sycamore that is a wondrous healer of itself. Fences have been tied to it, nails driven into it. The lightning has burned it. There's no year it has flourished in that has not harmed it. It bears the gnarls of history healed over. It has risen to a strange perfection in the warp and bending of its long growth. It has gathered all accidents into its purpose. Wendell Berry's sycamore tree is a metaphor for our own lives. We are shaped by our life experiences, scarred by some and softened by others, made stronger by some, more vulnerable by others. Fences, nails, and lightning strikes all have their equivalents in our own lives. Like a resilient tree, we all bear the gnarls of our own history. The psalmist says our happiness, and to this we can add our resilience, depends on our meditating on God's law day and night. And what is the law of the Lord for us but the law of love? Love of God and love of neighbor, love of ourselves and love for creation. All is held in the life-giving hands of God, who waits for us to stay still like the trees and send our roots down into that living water that is God's care for us. For what is meditating on God's law day and night but immersing ourselves in the love and care and power of God to sustain us during every hardship that strikes? We do the practical things we need to do when our lives are shaken, but ultimately what saves us is our ability to surrender our sense of control to God, moment by moment, day by day, in good times and bad. The blessings and woes Jesus spells out in Luke are easy to mistake for the more familiar Beatitudes in the Gospel of Matthew's Sermon on the Mount, but they are not quite the same. In Matthew, Jesus is on a mountaintop, teaching in lofty and transcendent terms. This time, he's down on the level place. Jesus gets down and dirty with his disciples in Luke. He teaches them about reality, about how life works in the here and now, and how to respond to it. Jesus is saying to them, look, today you may be poor, but tomorrow you could be rich. Today you're laughing, a week from now you could be in tears. And what's more intoxicating than all your friends and even strangers singing your praises? Who doesn't love that? You can just as easily fall from grace and not see it coming. Reversal of fortune is a fact of life, for both good and for ill. Sometimes we bring it on ourselves. Sometimes it happens to us by factors beyond our control. And some of us, it's true, escape the peril of tumbling from our material mountaintop, and others never enjoy rising to the top. But the way that life is, these things could happen to anyone. The critical lesson from Jesus is that our meaningful lives, our sense of purpose, our willingness to give and receive love cannot hinge on these changes. Happy are we who meditate on the law of the Lord day and night. This phrase, day and night, implies something all-consuming, something we make such a habit of giving our attention to that it reshapes our lives. The Psalm's call to meditate on the law of the Lord day and night is an invitation to immerse ourselves in practices of prayer and meditation, so much so that our default mode is a disposition of active trust that will give us the steadiness and elasticity of a tree. If God made even the trees to send their roots deep to survive and thrive, even in hardship, how much more does God sustain us through life's blessings and woes? Happy are we whose roots are in the natural law of God to sustain us and love us until we, like living psalms, can end our days in praise and thanksgiving.